Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for the Sense8 series finale, Amor Vincit Omnia. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Sense8, so I have to start with a spoiler warning for Sense8 up to the very end of the season, up to the series finale. If you haven't seen the series finale, go watch that first before watching this video, otherwise everything's going to be spoiled for you. So, Sense8. I really like Sense8. I think it was a good show. I think season 1 was a great show. I put it up as one of the best shows of the year it aired, and I really enjoyed season 1. Season 2, on the other hand, it had a lot of production issues and production problems, and I think that showed in season 2. Season 2 got bogged down, had very poor pacing. It got bogged down in too many shows, stunts with lots of montages and stuff like that, and the pacing was really off. The end of the season, the middle of the season was really good. It had some really strong episodes, so don't get me wrong. Season 2 wasn't a horrible season, but the end of the season was not very good. It felt very rushed. Like they just rushed right to the end of it. So I was actually very skeptical coming into the series finale. So, because the Christmas special, the episode that started season 2, it came out months before, that was a very poorly constructed episode with lots of montages. It was all over the place. The pacing was off. It was not good. So, I don't know, I was kind of thinking, or fearing at least, that this series finale would be kind of like that. Now, if you don't know Sense8, well, you should know if you're watching this video, but Sense8 was canceled after season 2, and many people were very upset. There was a fan outcry. People couldn't believe it. I personally could believe it because season 2, as I said, it was not very well constructed. It definitely had a lot of production issues. It went over budget. So I wasn't very surprised it got canceled, nor do I particularly disagree. Although I will say I would have liked to see the story play out. I was interested because there was a 5-year plan, and from the very beginning they had a 5-year plan for this show. So to cancel after season 2 means we're missing out 3 years of that 5-year plan. But Netflix, because of the outcry and because a lot of fans seem to like the show, they agreed to let the showrunners finish up the show with one 2-hour series finale. And so we get this, the series finale, which wraps up the storyline. So it doesn't end on a cliffhanger, because season 2 ended on a cliffhanger. And I think that's really nice of Netflix to do that. I wish more shows that got canceled that were long-term story arcs, that got canceled before they were finished telling that long-term story arc, should have been allowed the same, to at least let them finish in a series finale, a 2-hour special or miniseries or something. They did the same thing with Farscape. Farscape was canceled on a cliffhanger, so they allowed them to do a miniseries to wrap up the story. So a lot of other shows, though, like Stargate Universe is a good example, got canned before they could finish telling the story. They didn't give a crap. No, they didn't even let them do a 2-hour special to wrap it up. So at the very least, we got a 2-hour special for Sense8 to wrap it up. So, what are my overall thoughts of this episode, of the series finale, if I was worried that it would be really rushed? Because here's the thing, knowing that they have 3 years planned, and they're going to try to wrap it up in one 2-hour special, it makes me think that it's going to be incredibly rushed, and that's what I've felt like the end of season 2 was. Now, the funny thing is that this season finale for season 2, I actually think was one of the worst episodes of the show, because it was very disjointed. The end felt very rushed, it just jumped. But I looked it up on IMDb, and it's the highest rated episode by the fans, which quite frankly shocked me. And I just went back and looked at my review that I did for that episode, and it has a very bad like to dislike ratio. It has way more dislikes than it does likes. So I'm starting to think a lot of people disagree with me on this and like that finale. But for me personally, it was extremely poorly paced. It had some good ideas, some good action scenes, but it just didn't gel. It felt really disjointed. So I was worried that this series finale would feel the same way. So, ultimately, my final verdict. What did I think of this? I really liked it. It was a lot better than I thought it would be. It wasn't as poorly paced. It didn't feel incredibly rushed, although there were definitely a lot of parts to this finale where you could tell they were trying to cram in the rest of their, the 3 years they had planned into this 2-hour special. You can kind of tell they were like cramming in stuff, and some parts of it did feel rushed. But as an episode itself, it actually wasn't too bad in terms of feeling rushed. It actually was pretty well structured, pretty well paced. It wasn't all over the place like the Christmas special, for example, that I brought up. So my fears that it would be as bad as that were apparently not justified, which I'm very relieved. I was very relieved to find out that it's not another Christmas special. It does, in fact, have a really good, it was really engaging, pretty good structure. But was it perfect? No. It did have a lot of issues. Now, the thing, and I'll get more into this later, like the first half of the finale I loved. I thought was great. It was like, wow, this is amazing. But then the second half it started to teeter a bit. It got bogged down in a couple of those montage type things that they'd love to do in season 2, which I think were a bit unnecessary. And it's just spouted out exposition. And in the second half you could tell a bit more that they were trying to cram too much into 1 2-hour special, and it just got a bit of a, exposition overload. Like, here's this, here's that, and it sort of disconnected me to the story a bit. And then there was the final, 25-30 minutes of this of this episode, which should have been 5. At the very, maybe 10 minutes. That was so unnecessary, and the ending was just shameless. I don't want to say cash grab. I want to say call for attention. It's like, ooh, look at this, aren't they edgy? Doesn't add anything to the story. Doesn't add anything to the characters. It was just a gimmick. It was very gimmicky. So that ending really brought down my opinion of the episode as a whole, which actually I would have loved if we're just judging by the first half. But even the second half was engaging and decent. But that final bit at the epilogue, which went on for way too long, no. Just no. Anyway, let's get into this. First of all, I want to talk about J. Michael Straczynski. I always pronounce that wrong. Some people just call him JMS for short, which is easier. Because he's on the mind, because at the moment I'm reviewing Babylon 5, and he is the showrunner, creator, genius, mastermind behind Babylon 5. And he also created Sense8, but he collaborated with the Wachowskis, and he talked about that. I just watched an interview with them. It was a pure collaboration, and a lot of B5 fans were trying to be like, oh, JMS is the genius behind Sense8. He's the one. He's the mastermind. It's not quite the same thing as it was with Babylon 5. He actually talks about how it was a collaboration between him and the Wachowskis, and you can definitely see the Wachowskis' finger, their flavor on this, especially this finale. But that's the other thing, is that J. Michael Straczynski did not write this finale. It was the only episode of Sense8 that he didn't have a writer's credit for, and so I was a bit curious to see if that was because he didn't like the idea of the finale. Did he have a falling out with the Wachowskis? But I looked it up, and apparently it's just that he had signed on to do another job after Sense8 got canceled. So he was just busy doing other things. So it doesn't, speak anything to what his personal feelings on this show or anything was. He was just busy doing another project, so that's very fair enough. But this is the only episode that he wasn't involved with, so does make me wonder if that did have an effect. Maybe at least the last 20-30 minutes. But anyway, that's something interesting to get in. Anyway, let's get into this episode proper. So let me talk about this first half. Why did I like it? Why did I think it was so great? Well, The series finale, as I said, it had a very rushed ending and it was very disjointed, but it had all the Sense8s, like our 8 major characters were all in location. And that was something I was interested in. That's something that excited me, something I wanted to see more, because we didn't really get that in the show up to this point, because they're all in their various locations across the world. And so this episode starts with them all in the location, and I think it does it really well. It sort of plays off of how they combine being in the same location, but they still use their Sense8 abilities to be like, if someone's down the street getting coffee or something, they can still use their Sense8 abilities to be there and sort of talk to people who are not in the next room and sort of coordinate. And they also bring in some of the supporting cast as well who aren't Sense8s, such as Nomi's girlfriend and Lito's boyfriend and that other chick that they hooked up with, and a few other people who aren't Sense8s, and I love how they incorporated them. And then as the episode goes, you get more and more of those supporting cast arriving by the end of the episode, then pretty much anyone who's important is there. And I actually like that. I love how they brought everyone together. I think the progression of that through the episode worked really well. It was great seeing this. And of course, at the start of the episode, they're dealing with, they had captured Whispers and they were holding him captive, and they want to exchange him for Wolfgang, who's still being held by I think the DPO they're called, or whatever. So that was really a really intense scene. I think the way they played out, the way Whisper tried to get in their head. Like, to me, this part of the episode did not feel rushed at all. It didn't feel rushed. It felt very well paced. It felt It was extremely engaging. You got the character bits. It was good pacing. I say it's good pacing because they had time for character bits and they had time for plot elements and time for suspense. I think they juggled these things extremely well, especially with the huge cast that they had when they had all the Sense8s there and they're bringing in more and more of these supporting characters. I think the way they juggled it was really well. Now, in this episode overall, some characters did get more focused than others, and I'll touch on that later in this review. But I think they did the best job that they could with the cast that they had and keeping the story fresh and engaging, and the action, the action sequences that they had when they were trying to do the exchange, and how they had this sort of Ocean's 11 type scheme where you see them planning and you see some of the parts of the plan come to action as they had to stake out this nightclub and in order to do the exchange between Whispers and Wolfgang. That was all pure gold. Like, I think it was really well executed. I was really engaged. I thought it was definitely a really great thing. However, after the scene with the exchange, alright, we get the scene where all the supporting characters who are there. There's still a few more that come on later on, but all the Sense8s and all the supporting characters there have a dinner, and it was a really nice scene. I think it was a character moment that we needed, and they really connect. And then after that, we get the scene with the mother or whatever. There's these other group of Sense8s who, we see one of them tried to kill Whispers when they didn't want them to, and they follow her. She comes and they take her to this land of enchantment, whoever the hell it is, not entirely sure, and it like exists sort of outside of space or whatever. I don't know, but anyway. That whole thing was totally unnecessary. And to me, this is where I got the strongest feeling that this was a whole thing, a whole story thread that they had planned to do in season 3 or 4 or whatever. And because we didn't get a season 3 or 4 or whatever, that they just try to cram it in here to give it a call out. Oh, let's do it. But it doesn't add anything to the plot. It's not touched on again. In fact, all the exposition that she gives about why they need to kill Whispers, whatever, we already knew. That when Riley had that conversation with that French ambassador or whatever. So that was all you needed. That gave you all the exposition you needed. This scene with her and them is just totally pointless. But that's the other thing I'm going to say is that I'm not going to try to explain the plot in great detail because, to be frank, a lot of it went over my head because it has been over a year since I've seen season 2. I didn't have time to watch it again before this episode, so there's a lot of things I don't remember. And to be frank, like both season 2 and this episode just throw exposition. Like, even when I saw season 2, I didn't totally get it. I mean, I got enough to get the gist of it and what's going on with the story, but a lot of the details were a bit fuzzy, so I'm not even going to try to get into that. And so let me get into the second half of this episode, and we'll start with there was too much exposition thrown at you very fast, like particularly like the backstory with Jonas and Angelica and all that. I mean, I have a rough idea of what was going on, but I think they sped through that like way too fast, and particularly the ending where Jonas, like, I get what he did. Like, he uses the drones because they thought Whispers was the only one who could, but Angelica helped set up that whole system, so they created a backdoor so Jonas could use it as well. So that's why he was trying to get away. Because that's why it looked like he was betraying them, but he wasn't, because he just wanted to get to this place so he could use the drones, and he used this to kill the chairman. And they played it off like this really cathartic, this really, grand moment that they had been building up to, and it's supposed to be like this cathartic release. But I didn't get that at all, because I don't feel like, and again, this is probably a result of them having to cram this all into one finale. If they had like a couple seasons to get you more invested in this storyline, get you more invested in what's going on, I feel like it would have been the cathartic moment. But as it stands, I wasn't really invested in the storyline. Like, I get what he was doing, and I get the, why it's such a great thing he's managed to kill this, but I wasn't that invested personally, because I just didn't have any personal investment, because I didn't think the storyline was explored very well, nor were the characters involved explored very well. And by the way, that's not just a problem with this episode, it was also a problem with season 2. It didn't do a really great job of getting you invested in the storyline. And also, speaking of the chairman, as I said, it's been over a year since I've seen season 2, so I can't remember if he was mentioned in season 2 or all. He probably was, but still, like, I didn't care about this guy. Like, they played off like this big, huge mystery. He's wearing this mask. Oh, who is he? Oh, he's that one guy we saw in the background of this one flashback. Oh my God, I'm so shocked. But I don't know, maybe someone will say, oh, he was more in season 2. As I said, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I don't remember seeing him. So even if he wasn't very memorable. But anyway, so I didn't care. Like, I know he was like the head guy. And again, this is another thing I'm sure they could have built to better if there had been later seasons. They could have built the chairman up more. Who is he? Made him more important. I'm pretty sure that was their plan. So it's kind of not their fault, because they had to cram in the rest of the story into this 2 hour. But this is where I think it kind of shows, because it's supposed to be like this great thing. Oh my God, they killed the chairman, but I don't really care. All I know about it, he's the leader of the GPO or whatever, and that makes him evil, but he's just an evil face. And I have no personal investment in him. And then also with Whispers, they try to play him up, like, make him like this. He's so, like, they keep adding more and more, and it seems like they wanted to make him this grand thing. I was actually hoping they'd write this character off. Even in season 1, I never liked this guy. He always came off as two-dimensional to me, and this episode didn't do anything to help that. So I think the way they focused on him way too much, I wasn't a fan of. Okay, so now let me get into the whole montage things. As I said, that dinner scene that they had, that was nice, that was good. It was a good way. But then they kept going, and they kept going. They kept having these montages. I'm like, all right, now you're just being like the Christmas special. Now you're being like season 2. Like, we don't need all these montages. Like the stuff where they were listening to the Depeche Mode song when they were on their way, I think to Paris or wherever they were going. Some people were in a car, some people were in a train, and they were listening to Depeche Mode, and they could hear, and they made a huge. It seems like they were just trying to recapture, rip off what they did in season 1 with the Four Non-Blondes song, and it felt like a hollow imitation of that, and it felt really unnecessary. Like, oh, someone's listening to a song, let's have a montage. And it has a cheesy feel when you do all these too many of these montages where everything's like, oh, we're so happy together, and oh, this is so great, we're chilling, we're jamming. It just makes it come off a bit cartoonish. It does. And that one definitely did. I'll touch on the other montages a bit later. But anyway, too many. And here's the other thing. And this was somewhat present in the first half of the film episode, sorry, but it was more present in the second half of the episode, and that is they come off, all our main characters come off as Arnold Schwarzenegger types. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Jean-Claude Van Damme type, yeah, I know that's ironic, but type action heroes who can go around shooting guns, killing tons of people, and not getting a scratch on them. And especially Wolfgang. Wolfgang in particular is he can just go around and go shooting, like killing dozens of people. Nothing wrong happens to him. It's really fake. I mean, to be fair, even movies I really like Lord of the Rings, they do this as well. So this in itself doesn't make it bad, but it is a cheesy element to it. It's just like, oh, come on, guys. And like pretty much all of them, like they all go into the when they try to break Whispers out of that compound. And I did actually like this scene. I mean, I will put it out there because I heard some people complain about the whole Trojan horse and how they pretended to be tourists. I actually liked that. I thought that was cool. I thought it was really suspenseful. And again, it was getting back to the Ocean's 11 type heist planning thing. I like the setup, but I didn't like where it went because they didn't really accomplish anything. They were just all going around killing like crap loads of people and not getting hurt. Now I know like a couple of the supporting cast got shot. Like it seemed like they were doing it. Okay, we have to show that they're not indestructible super beings. So let's have a couple of them get shot in the arm or something. I know one of them got shot in the gut, but they all survived. So it was kind of pointless. And then the whole thing about like they're bringing in civilians, like. They kind of explain why they could have someone like Riley who has no fighting experience because she says, well, I don't know how to hold a gun, but you do. Said that to, what's his face? The cop, blanking on his name. But anyway, so that explains that they have their Sense8 ability, so even if they don't have fighting, like Kala as well, even if they don't have any fighting experience themselves, they're connected to those who have, so they can go in. But they also had people like Lito's friends and Kala's husband and people like that who don't have Sense8 abilities going to this war zone basically and this action thing. And what the fuck are they doing there? I mean, they're just going to get killed. They should be pretty freaking useless. So it was ridiculous to include them in this thing as well. So yeah, that part of it I kind of didn't buy at all. But yeah, the other thing is Kala gets shot, and I thought this was pretty, like when I first saw this happen I was like, holy shit, they're going to go to the dark place. They're going to, because they show when she got shot all the other Sense8s were connected to her, so they all felt the pain. I thought that was a really powerful scene, and I thought it was going to be even more powerful when she died because they would kill off one of the Sense8 and it would have this dark overtone to this film saying that they're not action heroes and not Arnold Schwarzenegger. Some of them are infallible, and I think that would make Wolfgang feel incredibly guilty because he was using her body. And how guilty would that be that he was using her body and he got her killed? I mean, this could take this finale into a really dark place, a really interesting dark place, because this is the finale, so a main character could die, and it could have a huge impact. And I think if she did die there, it would have a positive impact on the story overall. It would make it a lot more interesting, a lot more fascinating. But no, she doesn't die. The ghost of her, not the ghost, but the Sense8 part of her. It's like, I'm still alive, hurry up and save my life before I die, you idiots. And they rush to save her, which is kind of interesting, I guess. But then the next time we see her, she's A-okay. Oh yeah, that was a flesh wound. Getting back to Arnold Schwarzenegger movies again. So the whole thing about them actually being real life humans, out the window. They're larger than life, indestructible superheroes. They just get shot for token scenes like this, so whatever. Anyway, okay, alright, let me just say before I get into this ending that I did like the way it was resolved with them going after the chairman and Jonas killing him and they catching up to Whispers and that chick, whatever her name was, can't think of it at the moment. But So that was really engaging. That was suspenseful stuff. Although the thing with the rocket launcher, like, that was cool and all, but it's Chekhov's rocket launcher. Like, when they introduced it earlier in the episode, when Wolfgang's friend brought it, it's like, oh, I brought your favorite thing. It's Chekhov's gun. They're not going to introduce this rocket launcher if they're not going to use it. So as soon as they you bring it, it's like, oh, right, he's going to use the rocket launcher to destroy the helicopter. And it happened maybe a little bit too easily, to be honest. And then after the scene, it seemed like they're totally defeated. They won. They defeated DPO. It's all over now. That seemed to happen a bit too quick, a bit too easily. But again, to be fair, I'm sure this is a result of them having to condense all their storyline into one episode. So I can't really fault them too much for this one, because they probably handled it the best way that they could with what the situation that they were given. Okay, let me get into this final sequence, this epilogue, this end. Okay, so this ending should be shown in high school. So this should be like shown with the motivational videos and the kids who are growing up and they want to know what direction they can take in life, because there's a lot of valuable lessons in this final scene for children. The first valuable lessons is, if you're having misunderstandings with your parents and you're not getting along with them, and perhaps they're not treating fairly to you, and you want to strengthen their relationship, slip some hallucinogenic drugs into their food, and that will fix everything all up, all perfectly. You will have a perfect relationship from then there on. And so that's all it takes, slipping in some hallucinogenic drugs into your your parents' food. Also, another important lesson: if you're having relationship problems, if you're getting into a long-term relationship, and you're not, you want to strengthen your relationship, have a threesome. That will make your relationship so much better. And if you find out that your significant other loves someone else, have sex with both of them, because just everything will be perfect. There's no such thing, like, you don't have to worry about like people feeling jealous or insecure or inadequate, or maybe one person loving the person over the other. No. None of that stuff happens. It will just magically fix your relationship. And for that matter, don't just have sex with threesome, have an orgy. Orgies are awesome. Orgies will fix all of your problems. That's a good lesson, kids. Go to orgies, because they are great and they will expand your experience of the world. Okay. Now, before I continue anymore, I think I should clarify that I am not a prude. I am not putting this ending scene down because, it's all sex and nudity and I don't like sex and nudity. I actually think I criticize people for having that attitude about Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones in particular, even though in the first 2 seasons they were a little bit gratuitous with their sex and nudity, it still was a part of the world. It serviced the story. So when people are like, I don't watch this show, it's all like a porn, it's all about sex, they're missing the whole point of the story. They're missing that's just there to enhance the story, which it does. So I am not one to be prudish just because they have sex scenes or nudity scenes. That don't mind at all. But the key is if they're used correctly. Because as I said in Game of Thrones, even though season 2 maybe went a tad bit overboard with this, they were used to enhance the characters, enhance the setting, do world building, and enhance the kind of world it is and the kind of characters involved, and I think it was used beautifully. Here, it was 100% unnecessary. It was just there for shock value. It was just there to be all, ooh, look at how edgy we are. Look! We're going to end the whole show on a scene of a wet and slimy dildo. Ooh, we're so edgy. That's what I got of it. It was a gimmick. It was gimmicky. That's what I didn't like about it. Like the nudity and stuff in Game of Thrones, that's world building, it's character building. This is gimmicky. Plain and simple. It's just a gimmick. Doesn't help with the story at all. It doesn't help with the characters at all. It's completely 100% unnecessary. And it's funny because, like, they did these orgy scenes. They had one season 1 and it was all controversial. Ooh, so they did another one season 2. It was like, ooh. But I don't know. I guess there must have been a lot of people who liked these orgies, because people I knew and the critics that I watched didn't like the first orgies thing. They thought it was a bit ridiculous, a bit over the top. This one was like that on steroids. It was way ridiculous, way over the top. And it's so convenient that all of the main characters, all the Sense8s, all hooked up with someone. They all had a significant other. They all found someone that they could all have sex with at the same time, except for Wolfgang. I was like, oh, poor Wolfgang's left out. But no, he goes in and joins in a threesome with Culla and her husband. So nobody's left out. And then they show everyone together in one giant orgy thing. And it kind of implied that her husband was actually feeling this orgy, even though he's not a Sense8. So does that mean somehow they transferred the giant orgy, so even those who weren't Sense8s were there with absolutely everyone else in the room? I don't know. I didn't really get that. But boy, was that stupid. And even leaving that aside, like the wedding, I'm not saying, let me clarify here, I'm not saying they shouldn't have had the wedding. They should have. It was a really touching, it was a really great way to end the episode and to end the series. First of all, they should have just ended it at the wedding and not bother with the orgy. No, that didn't need to be there at all. But the wedding was really touching. It was really touching seeing all these characters come together. But that wedding scene should have been like half of the time that it was, at least. I think if you include the orgy and everything, like the whole epilogue was like 25 minutes or something, it should have been 5 minutes, maybe 10. But they should have ridiculously like hacked and slashed. The editor sucks, or the director who made the editing decision, whichever. They did their assembly edit where they put all the shots together, and then they just like, fuck it, I don't feel like editing this anymore. Let's just show the whole fucking thing. Where they should have been like, no, this is too long. We need to edit this down so it gives a nice, succinct, powerful ending to this great show. But no. Can't do that. We can't end on a high note. We have to end with a sloppy dildo and a lot of the huge, gigantic orgy because we're edgy, we're gimmicky, and that's just right after that. They said for the fans. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not in touch with the fan base in the show. Maybe the fan base just wanted a giant orgy. Maybe that's why they did it. And they're speaking specifically about that one orgy scene. I thought they were talking about the whole episode. This is where we're going to end the show for the fans. That's what I thought, but maybe they just meant the orgy scene because maybe the hardcore fans just want a giant orgy. That's the way we end the show, folks. Have all the main characters all have sex with each other. Great. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, there's nothing wrong with that in principle if it works for the story, but not if it's completely unnecessary and just a gigantic fucking gimmick like it is here. Totally. Anyway, so the wedding scene. Yeah, that was touching. Like, I love the vows between Naomi and her wife now. That was really touching stuff. But, again, could have been shorter. We didn't need to see as much, like when they're at the dancing, the reception, and they're raving and stuff. We don't need that. They could have ended right after the vows, after the fireworks. That's a perfect place to end the episode. But anyway, I'm not going to harp on that any further. But let me get more into these character stories. And since I'm on the subject of the threesome, let's talk about Wolfgang Culla and her husband. This was handled kind of dumb. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Like, there's this, like, it was a love triangle, but he shows up, the husband shows up, and they never have a point where he acknowledges that she's in love with this other person. I mean, I don't know what point he realized this, if he realized that right away, because they weren't very clear, because you think his reaction would be, I'm so hurt, I feel betrayed, how dare you, you are in love with another man. That moment never comes. And the show tries to sort of play it off because they have that guy and Wolfgang bond. Like, he saves Wolfgang's life, and then later Wolfgang returns the favor and saves his life, and so they become good friends. And it seems like they were purposely setting that up so that there wouldn't be a conflict love triangle, so that they could instead have a threesome and they all have sex with each other. It seemed a bit unrealistic, to say the least, a bit contrived. I mean, I know there are relationships like this in real life where they have multiple relationships and people get on fine without any drama or jealousy or anything. But let's be realistic here. That's not the norm. That is the abnorm. Like, normal society people have hang-ups like jealousy and can't get over their loved one being with someone else. And you think that Kelly's husband in particular, even if she and Wolfgang were a bit more open-minded, I don't think he would be as open-minded. I don't think he would just be okay with this right away. It just didn't have... It felt really contrived. But anyway, let me get into, like... Let's talk about the characters, because I think for the most part the character stories were serviced very well. But there inevitably, and I think there's no way to avoid this, there were some neglected characters, some characters who weren't really in the finale. But as I said, this is like a side effect of having to wrap up this entire show in one 2-hour setting. And those neglected characters were mainly Leto and Cappius. We got a little bit of them, but like we had Leto acting like a drama queen, and his friends were, his partner and his friend were there, and they had some input in the ending, but we didn't get any sort of character moments or character development with him. He was kind of just there and just to be comic relief and just to do things. And Cappius, he had a whole thing with like running for prime minister that was never, they just touched on him briefly, they never resolved it, they just had his, the woman he was in love with fly out so they could have a giant orgy together, and she was just like seemed thrown in there. And Cappius did have stuff to do during the action sequence. Of course, he did the Van Damme driving, and he had his moments and his lines. But again, no sort of character development for him. But as I said, it's kind of understandable. On the flip side, the characters I think were very well used was Sun. I really liked her storyline. With the detective guy who flew over from Korea to find her and saved her life. Even though it was a bit of a deus ex machina, I thought it was really well used one. And I liked the development, their sort of banter when they're talking over the phone. I think this is something they did take the proper time to set up and develop, and I thought this was well earned. And it was great seeing those two together. So that was a great... use of that time. Will, of course, he's always the most present one because he's a cop, so he has the most skills relevant to the action scenes and stuff like that. And his character development, his relationship with Riley. His relationship with Riley wasn't developed anymore. I think they did as much as they could in season 2, so it didn't need to be. So I think that was actually a smart decision. But his character development and his resolution, you felt like he got closure in this episode, and that really worked. As well. And Nomi, of course, her relationship with her wife and them getting married, that was a really great. So those characters were wrapped up really well. Some of the others not so much. But anyway, the whole thing with Wolfgang, I'm not even going to get into that. I already talked about that threesome thing. But anyway, my rating for Sense8 series finale out of 10 is a 7, very good. So when I was first watching this episode, for most of the episode, like the first hour and so, I was like, I'm going to give this episode a 9. This is actually really good, it's really tight, it's really strong. But then in the second half, they got bogged down with too many montages, and they got rushed through the exposition. Some of the scenes didn't have the impact that they could have. So I was like, alright, I'm going to drop this episode to an 8. But it's still an 8, still a powerful episode. But then, we got that totally useless epilogue with the orgy, and I was like, oh, that's so dumb, I'm going to have to drop it to a 7 now. So my final rating for this episode is a 7 out of 10. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. That is it for Sense8, so that is it for my coverage of it. Now let me just finish by saying this, even though this might anger some fans, I'm not upset that Sense8 has ended, especially after seeing Season 2 and seeing this finale. I think even though this finale did feel a bit rushed, and I know that they had 3 more years planned, I am undeniably curious to have seen how those 3 years would have went. I still say, judging by how the Season 2 went and how this season went, I think it was a smart way to do. I think if they did do 3 more years, that it would just get bogged down in pointless montages and gimmicks, and feel rushed and poor pacing. So I'm actually think it was a smart thing to do to end the show now, and so I don't feel cheated. I don't feel like this is a great disappointment this show was canceled. I feel like It's what needed to happen. I was satisfied with this ending. It would have been better without an epilogue, but still satisfying way to end the show. So I'm happy with it, and I don't need to see any more Sense8. Anyway, that is it for my review of the Sense8 series finale. You can check out my channel as I cover many other shows like The Expanse, Star Trek, Game of Thrones, Babylon 5, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.